Switch to Instagram. Boom. Okay. And we go live. It's always something here. Gotta love technology, especially when you're doing it on your own. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Meet the Author. We're so excited to have Micheal Brown here today. Our hats and cigars, flairing and pairing. Yes. Let's clap it up. Let's clap it up. Let's clap it up. Okay, so before we get into the book, tell me about the hat you currently have on. And then I want to get to this flairing piece because I was fascinated by this part in the book.
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this and come to this beautiful place, JT Workspace, and to Meet the Author event. So, yeah, the hat I'm wearing today is from a company called Goorin Brothers, which I used to work for Goorin Bros a few years ago. And so this is one of the hats. This is a nice mint color. And I've added some flair to the hat with, of course, the Hats and Cigars pin and also some nice feathers to complement the hat.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as someone who also has a personal style, and I think we all do, we all should have a personal style and enjoy when we're walking out in the streets and people can kind of read us as we're walking, right?
Right.
I never thought about the fact that people put personalities onto their hats. I mean, obviously, yes, in their clothes, you have your lapel, you put on, you have a kerchief or whatever flair you put on, sunglasses, etc. But the hat pins and the hat decorations, can you talk to me a little bit more about how people can sort of think about the ways that they can flair their hat?
Yeah, I think, as I discussed in the book, and I think one of the most common ways to flair your hat is with a feather. I think that goes back to as far back as you can think about any type of accessory that you would add to a hat would be a feather. So it seems like that's the most natural place. But of course, working in the hat, in a hat business and kind of being around hatting for so many years and understanding how you can accessorize hats, what things you can add to hats. And through the years, it just, for me, I've been able to find that there are multiple things that you can use, whether it be, of course, feathers, hat pins, but also I've noticed that people like myself will also add personal items such as mementos or something very personal. I happen to, I was fortunate enough to go to Paris and to Cognac, France, and do a project with Hennessy. And we were able to eat dinner at the Hennessy Mansion. After dinner, I was lucky enough to enjoy a cigar from there. And also, they had there was a Hennessy matchbook. So I took a couple of matches from that matchbook and I put the match into my hat band. So that's like something, you don't normally think about, but something that you can do to add some flair to your hat. It's also personal and it's a reminder of a particular moment that I had. So also people don't normally think of those things. And so that's kind of what I like to do is encourage people to kind of, not necessarily, of course, you could go with the norm, but also to kind of branch out and find other things that are personal to you that can represent your style.
I love that. Your book is a lot about culture and finding your style and finding all these passions that you've put together.
Yes.
I'm glad you started off talking about Hennessy because ironically, I was just talking to one of my best friends about Hennessy. And we know in the culture, especially in the Black culture, hip hop culture, Hennessy is a major.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it's a brown liquor. And she says to me, she's not really a liquor connoisseur. She says, is Hennessy the only brown liquor? I'm like, oh boy. And she, but Hennessy is just something I think that if you've grown up on hip hop, you've had a Hennessy and Coke, you've had a little cognac in your glass. And reading this adds a layer of sophistication to Hennessy that I had never particularly thought about. Have you thought about sometimes that juxtaposition? Because I think Hennessy as a brand sometimes gets a bad rap because maybe it's associated with hip hop or
Right.
the culture. So it feels not sophisticated, but it's extremely
Right.
sophisticated cognac and alcohol. Can you just talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that
I think it
experience?
really comes down to perspective.
Mm.
Of course, I initially was introduced to Hennessy, like you said, in the hip hop culture back in the mid 90s to late 90s. I was an up and coming rapper at the time back in
Okay, wait, hold
in
on. Let us
Indiana.
find out, Michael. You were up and coming rapper back in the day.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, throughout the 90s, um, I came up with a rap group called Game Clinic, and we put out 3 albums.
Oh, wow.
In the 2 in the 90s, 1 in the early 2000s. And so, of course, like I said, kind of being in the hip hop culture was my introduction to Hennessy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a different outlook toward Hennessy, toward cognac at that time. But it's something that I've continued to enjoy throughout my years. And as I've gotten older, that perception has changed. And like you said, now I drink Hennessy in a more sophisticated manner. Of course, pairing it with cigars has added another element, another way to enjoy Hennessy. As where, of course, many years ago, I was drinking Hennessy differently. As where now, much older, more refined, more cultured, more mature, I drink Hennessy, like you said, in a sophisticated way, enjoying it with a premium cigar and pairing it that way. So I think perception has a lot to do with that, but also, like you mentioned, in terms of how I describe it in the book, that's kind of what I wanted to translate. So I'm glad you picked up on that, and definitely want to bring some sophistication to the art of drinking cognac.
Yes,
Sure.
I love that. Okay, so you brought it up, pairing, and obviously
Yeah.
it's part of the title.
Yes.
And in here you talk about different types of pairing. One with coffee, which
Yep.
I definitely did not think about.
Yes.
Of course, obviously your cognacs. And then you also mentioned wine, so your port wines, which tend to be a little heavier, sweeter
Yes.
type of wine. So you don't have to, I don't want to go totally into the book because people got to buy it.
Yeah.
But if you want to just give a high level overview of what those pairings kind of mean to you and what you're thinking about when you're drinking a coffee or if you're having a cognac or a port wine, which is more like a dessert wine.
Yes. I what I did was going into the pairings in the book, really, I guess, are kind of my my natural pairings. So, of course, I'm a fan of cognac and I drink cognac. That's my spirit of choice. And usually what I will pair with cigars. Coffee as well, though. Usually I'll have coffee in the morning and have a cigar in the morning as well. So I just became to the point where I realized that coffee and cigars as a pairing just works so well. So it's a great way for me to start the day. And so I love that pairing of coffee. Of course, cognac with cigars goes great, but also the port wine was something new for me. And since I've been trying to also get deeper into wines to pair with cigars, but it is a difficult pairing to come up with because wines are complex, just like cigars. So to find two that work together it is a task indeed. But also in the book, there's pairings with Scotch as well, which that's one of my favorite pairings in the book is with the Dalmore cigar malt and the Davidoff Winston Churchill, the late hours. So, yeah, but I mean, pretty much all of the pairings in the book are what are called 2-part pairings, where you have one part being the cigar and the second part being the spirit. Something that I'm looking at doing down the road and possibly expanding into gourmet pairings, which are pairings that consist of multiple parts. So more than 2, 4 even. I've known some master cigar sommeliers who have done 12-part pairings,
wow.
which yeah, I just can't imagine all those pieces working together, but definitely can be done. So the pairing aspect in the book was one of the parts that I enjoyed the most because that journey and that exploration through multiple cigars and multiple spirits to find those pairings that work together, something I definitely like to do.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, of course, you mentioned wine, the complexities of wine,
Mhm.
and the complexities of cigar.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I learned a term which you just mentioned, which was cigar sommelier,
Yes, yes,
of which you are one, a
yes,
cigar
yes.
sommelier. So, can you talk a little bit about the similarities between the complexities of a cigar? You know, you
Mhm.
talked about how it heightens all of the senses or uses all of the senses when you're
Yes.
thinking through what kind of cigar you would like and deciding, you know, this is a cigar, this is what a cigar tasting is kind of like.
Mhm.
And so, as someone who loves wine, I go to Napa and
Yes.
Sonoma Valley every year with my bestie. I would love to hear a little bit more about that kind of comparison and really thinking about the heightening of your senses when you are smoking a cigar or when
Yes.
you're interacting with a cigar.
Yeah, so like you said, with wine, of course, it's very complex, and generally, wine and cigars come from similar type of regions,
Mhm.
similar type of terroirs, which is the land, the soil, um, the weather aspects that create all of those, and can be very complex. Same way with cigars, coming from similar type of regions, having similar type of terroirs and weather patterns that create those different type of tobaccos that then will be combined and rolled into a cigar. Um, so going through smoking a cigar, usually a cigar is going to be broken down into thirds.
Mm.
So you have the first third from the foot to about the middle of the cigar, which will be the second third, and at the end of the cigar is the third third. And so usually, depending on how a cigar is blended, you will notice changes throughout each of those thirds in a cigar. And usually cigars are blended that way, so that you have those changes in the cigar where as um, at the beginning of the cigar you may pick up certain notes, but as you move through the cigar and smoke the cigar, those flavor notes may build, or some more may be added into that. And then usually by the final third, you'll usually pick up some more strength in the cigar and some finishing notes there in the cigar. Kind of similar, like I said, with wine having those distinct notes and complexities in them. So in any time that you're pairing cigars, it's always that process of trying to find, you know, those notes and pick up those notes in the cigar, but also how do they play with the same type of notes or the notes from the spirit that you're pairing, the wine that you're pairing with the coffee, whether it be in pairings, we like to look at either complementary or contrasting, right? Whether it be the notes from the cigar, the notes from the spirit or wine complement each other, or do they contrast each other? But contrast in a way that um, you may have some sweet notes, say in the coffee, but some bitter notes in the cigar. But when together, they just kind of work themselves. They're not fighting against each other. They just kind of blend. And that's how you know when you have a great pairing.
Love that. So I don't think I read this part in the book, but this is just me
Yeah.
just thinking about some of the things I've seen.
Yes.
So over time, it seems that cigars have become a little bit more gender neutral. More women are getting
Oh, yeah.
into cigars lately.
Yes.
So if you were going to give advice to a woman who wants to start thinking about what kind of cigar or cigar profile she may like, what kind of cigar lounge should she go to? making sure they have a cigar sommelier on
Yes,
staff.
yes, yes.
Do you have any sort of tips
Yes.
in ways maybe not to feel intimidated? Because I know in some places can be a little smoky, and I
Yes.
wonder about that in terms of it maybe messing up the flavor of your own cigar while you're
Right.
smelling other people's.
No, there definitely is that. I know, in the past that was kind of some of the hurdles or hindrances from women going to cigar lounges or wanting to kind of enjoy a cigar. I mean, for the most part, cigar lounges have kind of been predominantly male. And so, but as the culture has grown and as the demographic of women has grown in the cigar culture, lounges have started to change to where they realize now that there are a lot of women who are in the culture, a lot of women who are enjoying cigars. And so now, more so now, there are lounges that are going to cater to that. It's just a matter of finding the right ones to do that. Of course, I know of one in Brickell, Miami.
Please go ahead and plug your cigar lounge, please.
Yes, Red Phone Booth in Brickell, Miami definitely is one of those type places. Reason being, it's not just strictly a cigar lounge. What it is a speakeasy lounge, and we do offer cigars there. Also, another caveat to that is that we have, I would say, the best air ventilation system. And so that is one of the things that women notice when they come to Red Phone Booth is that they don't notice the smoke. It's not all smoky in there, and they're not leaving
smelling like
with
in their
smoke
hair.
in their hair and in their
especially as
clothes.
Black women,
Yes.
we got to wash our hair. It's a
Yes.
whole process.
So, I mean, so I definitely suggest a place like Red Phone Booth, but there are other great lounges, of course, that I see many women going to. And so for me, it's great to see that. I just love that, to see that the culture is growing. I mean, for me, also, that's one reason um, that I wanted to be the hat ambassador. And I tagged myself the hat ambassador because I wanted to bring awareness to hatting and encourage people to start wearing hats. It felt like for some time years ago that hats had kind of fallen out in terms of being fashionable and people wearing them. And so when I got into hatting, that was one of the things I wanted to do is kind of bring hatting back to where we would wear hats on a regular basis, not just for function, not just solely for fashion, but something that we would incorporate into our lifestyle. And I think um, within the cigar culture is kind of where I first started seeing people wearing hats a lot. And so that's why I named the brand Hats and Cigars, is because it seemed like the two went together. And so since I've kind of been in both the hat culture as well as the cigar culture, I've seen that grown. Uh, the people wearing hats, people in the cigar culture wearing hats, women in the cigar culture. So all of that just tells me that both the hat culture as well as the cigar culture is thriving right now.
I love that. So, and my dad wears hats almost every day.
Okay, nice.
Every time people
Yeah.
see me, they're like, "Oh, your dad is always the one. He's always got a great hat on." He's a very sharp dresser, so that's the only thing
Nice.
that
All right.
people say. And I noticed in the book that you actually harken back to quite a few people in your childhood who
Yes.
wore hats and smoked cigars. And you realize now as an adult what an influence that was to have on you. Can you just talk a little bit more about something really great about an old school Black man? Okay, I love it.
But like, what was fun is, of course, when you write a book, you're thinking about what you would write, what you want to talk about. And it was funny in the reflection that I went through in writing the book and realizing that I had been influenced. At the time, of course, I never thought I was being influenced. I never thought about it. I never looked at it and thought, you know what? Maybe one day I'll wear hats, or maybe one day I'll smoke cigars. Because at the age I was, I just didn't catch on until much later in my life, um, being much older, and then I just kind of realized that wow, that's where that came from. So of course my dad wore hats all the time. I think that's kind of where I get my love for hats because I saw him wear hats a lot. At the time, of course, like I said, I didn't think of it as anything. I even mentioned in the book, usually people associated hats with what old people wore, or it just something. It just wasn't something that was norm for young people to be wearing hats or anything like that. So I never looked at that as being something that I would do or that would be cool until I started wearing it, and I was like, wow, like I never realized that how much that had an influence on me till later. Same way with the cigars. I speak in the book about a gentleman, Jack Brown, who I knew growing up, a great friend of my dad's. He was a deacon at the church. My dad was a pastor. And so every time we saw Mr. Jack, he had a cigar in his mouth. And I just thought that was the coolest thing as a kid, seeing this old guy with the cigar, which was coincidentally was never lit. He just always had that cigar in the corner of his mouth and he'd be chewing on it. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And so then, years later, and I get into smoking cigars. And like I said, at the time, would have never thought that was influence, but that was like when I thought back about it when I'm writing the book, and I'm like, that is the first instance that I remember of anyone smoking a cigar. And that it really, I just didn't realize how much it had stuck with me until I was writing the book, and kind of like I said, in that reflection of who I've become at this point, and realizing that a lot of those experiences that I had growing up are kind of what led me to want to enjoy hats and cigars.
I love that. Yeah. So you've alluded to time. So I'm going to go to 2015.
Okay.
Because that seems to be the year that a lot of things came together,
Yes.
according to the book.
Yes.
Where your passions for hatting, for cigar smoking, and then of course for the cognac and scotch all kind of came together, and you moved here to Miami.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that time? So you're originally from Indianapolis,
Yes.
Indiana. What was like, what? Let's move from the Midwest and let's go to Miami. And Miami was very different 10 years ago than it is now, right? So
yeah, for sure.
In 2015, I think it still pretty much had the reputation of being just more so a touristy, non-serious kind of vibe. And that's changed now over time with a lot of the entrepreneurs in the tech world and COVID, and a lot of folks coming down here from the Northeast.
Right.
But in 2015, that was not the case. So what was that leap of faith? How did you get your family behind you?
So Miami is a place that I've loved for many years. I originally came to Miami the first time back in '95 and fell in love with Miami. So years and years after that, I would always come on vacation. I was a tourist too, right? So I had a conversation with my wife one night after we were getting ready to come to Miami for one of our vacations, and we were just talking about it. She opened discussion and said, why don't we just move? Which I had never really thought about until that moment. And so because really I had her support, she was for it, we decided to do it. And so it was the best move I could have made. For me, at the time, I wasn't much of a hatter. I wore hats, but I didn't call I was a casual hatter, right, at the time. So when I got to Miami, one of the things I wanted to do was I was excited about being able to be in a city that had a vibrant cigar culture. Coming from Indiana at that time, there wasn't much of a cigar culture there. So that was one thing I was excited about coming to Miami. I ended up started working for Goorin Bros. So that's kind of where the hat journey started for me, and really when I really started wearing hats and getting in the hats. At that same time, I started going to cigar events here in South Florida, as well as other states and around the U.S. And getting into that cigar culture and really kind of seen the culture from a different aspect, something I had never seen back in Indianapolis. I was just so excited about being somewhere that had all of this access to cigars and going to cigar events. The first cigar event that I went to was Black Smoke Miami. Okay. And so to just see that side of the cigar culture, I knew that that was something, that was a place for me, right? I knew that the hat shop and being a hatter was a place for me, but I knew that the cigar culture was a place for me as well. And so I wanted to find my place, right, in both. And I figured the way to do that was to come up with cigar hat pins. Since I worked in the hat industry and also had this passion for cigars, to me, I was like, where could I fit in at? So I created the brand Hats and Cigars to be able to bring cigar-centric hat pins to the market. There was no market out there previous to that, no cigar hat pins out there available on the market. So I felt like for me, that was my place between the two cultures, being able to give to the hat culture and just the same as being able to give to the cigar culture.
All right, so we're talking about hats. I was fascinated to learn about the different, not just styles, but the names of the parts of the hat, like
Yes.
the brim and looking at the width. So can you?
Yes.
I don't know if you mind taking off the hat and just sort of showing people, or like pointing to it, or
For sure. So yeah, with hats, of course, primarily the anatomy of a hat. You're going to have the brim right here, and then always on the top of the hat is the crown of the hat. Right? You have the hat band, which is here. I'll turn this around also so you can see the feathers, the pin placement as well, which something that we regularly did at the shop when dressing up a hat is we put pins in the crease. So also mentioning the crease here, if you notice the two creases here in the front, that is one way to identify a hat as a fedora. Okay, so if the hat has the creases in the front, what you call a pinch, right? That's a fedora. Other hats that do not have those creases are not considered a fedora, whether it be a bowler hat, a boater hat, a pork pie hat, or like a Hamburg, which don't have the creases in the front. They are in their own class and not in the class of fedoras.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if I can recall where this quote is. I looked at it for a couple. I highlighted for a couple different reasons. One, because it was a woman quote, and like I said, I'm loving this idea that we're women are getting into the hat and cigar culture.
Yes.
And if I don't find the full thing, you'll have to forgive me. But I'm looking through my notes here.
Sure.
It's after this. Oh, here we are. It was by Hedda Hopper. I can wear a hat or I take it off, but either way, it's a conversation.
Yes.
Yes, let's talk about it. I love clothes that talk to us. So this really spoke to me.
Yes. So it's funny you brought that up too, because initially when I was going into writing the book and I was looking for a direction to go with the book and how I wanted to do the chapters, that is one thing that kind of for me was the beginning of each chapter, was using a quote.
Yeah.
And the particular quotes that I used in the book were quotes that spoke to me or allowed me the opportunity to discuss what I was speaking about. They kind of fit each chapter. So that one in particular, I like that you pointed that one out, because interestingly enough, there's one picture in the book of me without a hat on. And it's in that chapter that I referenced that quote, because like you said, whether I wear a hat or not, it's a conversation piece. And I found that to be true because people, as the hat ambassador, that's kind of my thing, of course, wearing the hat. And people get used to seeing me with the hat to where There was an occasion where I was somewhere and I didn't have a hat on. And people were like, "What? Like, where's your hat? Like, we're not used to seeing you without a hat. It's not right. Like, you have to have a hat on." I had no idea up until that point that it really affect like people that was how people were seeing me.
Mm.
And so I get tons of compliments. People always ask me about the hat. So of course, if I'm wearing one, it's a conversation piece. But of course, if I take it off, it's a conversation piece as well. So that quote in particular, yeah, was one that spoke to me as well. So I'm glad you pointed that one out for sure.
Love that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap, I would love to see if there's any quotes or parts in the book that you would like to just share with the audience.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
most
here's your
definitely.
book here.
Yeah, so I think for one to share, I'll go to the end of the book.
Okay.
I think because we just mentioned, of course, the chapters are led by a quote. And the last two chapters in the book, chapters 9 and chapter 10, are quotes from myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the last quote for me is one that is very important to me. And so chapter 10 in the book is titled Lifestyle and Legacy. The quote is, "Keep a cigar in your grip,
That one. That's so fun.
a drink at your lips, and a hat for your feet."
Yes.
So the first paragraph, "This is me. All day, every day. I say this quote often. It's my lifestyle and it's my legacy. Believe that. It's the tagline for my brand. It's my motto. And quite frankly, it doesn't get any better than this. If you ask me, there's not a better choice of words to express what this hats and cigars lifestyle is all about. Everything I believe in and stand for is in this quote. These are the three keys to the lifestyle. It's all about enjoying life. And in my opinion, there's no better way to enjoy it than this. Smoking a premium cigar, pairing it with a premium spirit, and wearing a premium hat to complete it all." Said by none other than yours truly, the Hat Ambassador.
Yes, I love that, Michael. Let's give some snaps, claps, all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, before we wrap, does anyone in the audience have any questions for Michael, aka Hat Ambassador? Yes.
What's one thing that you want someone to get out of people to get out of your book?
Wow. The one thing I think I would want people to get out of the book is understanding of the hat and cigars lifestyle and the hat and cigars culture. I think the book is perfect for someone who is wanting or is curious about hats or is curious about cigars, either or. But I think the book does a good job in breaking down the different hat styles.
Yes.
And in that way can help people understand the different styles. I also speak in the book about ways you can style the hat as well as what you're wearing as far as styling to complement the hat as well. And the same with cigars. I think it's a good introductory into cigars and cigar pairings. So I think for anyone who's interested in either culture or just wants to be able to sit down and have a good insight into both cultures, I think the book perfectly conveys that.
I totally agree. Yeah, I learned quite a bit reading your book. So
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Did you have? I didn't know if your hand was up. Yes. No. No. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else have? I think we might have a question in the audience.
Actually, I have another question.
Sure. Go
I
ahead.
don't know
Okay.
if it. Okay.
know what
So
that
for
was.
me, I am kind of struggling with my style.
Okay.
So like, what advice would you give me, like, to like kind of find my style and like find my signature style?
Wow, that's a great question. For me, It wasn't an easy task either to find mine. It's funny because people will ask me, if I always dressed like this or if I always had my style, and no, I did not. I didn't actually find my style until I moved here to Miami. I think for me, that kind of brought out the ability to find my style. So it took a while to do that. I think I would say in terms of finding your own style, I think you just have to kind of trial and error that. I think the biggest thing with any style or pulling off wearing a hat or anything like that, I think the most important thing is the confidence. Whatever you choose your style to be, whatever look you want to go with, as long as you're confident and you own it, people will notice that. So I think once you have that confidence, really it doesn't matter in your styling, whatever it is, it's gonna come through and people will notice it for sure.
Thank you.
That was a great question. Great question and a great
Yeah,
answer. I
thank
love
you.
that. Awesome. Well, let's give it up for Micheal. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. Our next Meet the Author is Monday, April 7th with Naseed Gifted. Where can people purchase your book?
Sure. Of course, Hats and Cigars, Flairing and Pairing is available on Amazon.com. Autographed copies are available on my website, hatsandcigars.com. So those will be the places you can get that. Of course, you can follow me as well on Facebook at Hats and Cigars or Instagram at Hat Ambassador.
Awesome. And then where's your lounge again? If people want to
Red
come
Phone
visit.
Booth is in Brickell, Miami. It's going to be, let's see, the 1010 Brickell Ave in Miami, Red Phone Booth.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. And like I said, the next Meet the Author is Monday, April 7th, JT Workspace in Hollywood, Florida. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Micheal.
Thank you.
That was great, guys.